to talk about. So I kind of broke it down into three different categories, and we can see kind of where we go. So obviously, there's player issues, parent issues, and then maybe a little bit if we have enough time to go through it, because I don't feel like it's that interesting, but worth talking about maybe is if you're the coach, issues with your organization or the people that are maybe in charge of you or scheduling things for you or whatever it is. So I want to start maybe from we'll start maybe with the player side and kind of see where it goes. Before we get into specific topics, though, maybe you can just give from your coaching experience, just some whatever thoughts about just conflicts in general. So as the coach, like it's basically conflict all the time, more or less, because people are never happy. So maybe you can just start on some general things about maybe an attitude that you could have as a coach dealing with this stuff, or how you thought about it before we get anything really specific. Does that make sense? Is that
Yeah,
enough
yeah,
to
yeah,
go
yeah,
on?
yeah, yeah. Like you just said, the one thing is that there's conflict is unavoidable because you're dealing with a whole bunch of people. So that's a given. Conflict as a coach, you're going to have parent conflict. That's unavoidable because you know that the bottom line. I'll probably say this after is that it's not about everybody liking you because it's not. I don't think it's possible. Actually, don't think it's possible. So you're going to have a let's just break it up into thirds again. If you're a good coach or good with a good human being coach, you probably have a third that love you, a third that whatever, and a third that can't stand you, and for various reasons. So you know there's going to be conflict, and you just know that, and it's a sport. You're dealing with people's kids, or you're not. If you're coaching junior or pro, you're still dealing with egos and stuff. So the conflict's there. It's unavoidable. So I think a lot of the times you need to just, well, let me go this way. You're either going to deal with it or you're not. And I think that's an important distinction to make. And I think it's important to be able to deal with conflicts and have some boundaries or not. But I would say have some boundaries of what's appropriate and what's not. Because if you open the door to people at any time, then they'll abuse that. If you shut the door totally, then it tends to make things a lot worse. So you have to kind of welcome it, and that's one of these things where unless you like conflict, not the funnest part of the job, but it's going to happen. So then I think that you have, again, just like if you go into when you're coaching a team, you have a theory or a identity for your team. You go into a practice, you have a theme for your practices. You have games, there's certain things you want to work on. I think it's the same thing when it comes to your policies with dealing with people. There's lines that you either are willing to cross or not, but you lay it out early. So, for example, this is not. I know. I'll just skip this part. I'll talk about that after.
Okay.
So does that make sense?
Yep, for sure. So I think two things for me before we get into the specific things. It's like one of those dichotomy things. So there's two things that I thought of just while you were talking is, as the coach, you're not trying to please people, but you're doing it in a way where you're not being a dick, if that makes sense. So when you're laying out your team rules, or if a parent comes to you with a complaint, you don't necessarily have to cater to that complaint, but you're not trying to be an asshole coach either, or an asshole person even, because like I'm thinking of personality types of people that used to coach me, and you always say the arms crossed, eyes crossed, nose crossed, whatever kind of coach, and you want to be, I don't know if sympathetic is the right word, but sympathetic to people's problems where you're hearing them out, but there's a line where it's like you don't have to necessarily cater to what they're saying. You know what I mean? Have something to say?
Yeah. Well, it's like that's a really good point because it's like sometimes less is more, or more is less. No, but like so if you get the coach, because this you just triggered something there. So you get the coach that has all these rules and regulations and the meeting and all this stuff, and he lays out this. Like every point that you lay out could actually add to another piece of conflict because you said that or you know what I mean. So that's like maybe one of the reasons. I'm thinking in hindsight, but I didn't really have parents meetings. I had like 2-3 rules maybe, and after that I just dealt with things because if I said okay, if someone's late for practice or you're not there an hour before, you sit 3 periods or 3 shifts. And now all of a sudden that's a rule. So when one guy does it and you don't give him the 3 shifts or missed a period, then another guy does it and you do. You see what I mean? You're just creating conflict and things for people to look for. Just creating all those kind of rules and all this stuff. Already you have someone sitting there, oh, this guy sounds like an asshole, or all that stuff. So it's like, yeah, that's what I mean. Less is more sometimes.
Yeah, for
So
sure. And then the other point I was gonna say is when you have your philosophy as the coach, you want to be able to like kind of stick to your guns as the coach, but you also need to be able to change if something comes your way that is worth changing for example. So like if you have your a certain philosophy as a coach and you lay that out to begin with, but then it's not really working for your team, well, if you just keep hammering that same philosophy for the rest of the year and it isn't working, then that's kind of a recipe for more conflict, kind of to your point. So it's kind of along the same lines as what you were saying, which I didn't really think of it in those words, but that is the way. I think that's kind of the moral of my story with these 2 points is just you want to be careful that you're not introducing more conflict. So you have to be able to do both sides of things a little bit in order to make sure that things are balanced. Because if you're just one way or one thing all the time, then it's going to be a conflict causer, even though you're going to cause conflict no matter what because you're the coach. So I want to just start with that.